There's a peculiar rule that the oldest corners of the internet seem to follow. The stranger something is, the quieter it gets. Not in the way that things fade out. Not the kind of quiet where people simply stop talking. I mean the kind of quiet where you realize, all at once, that the conversation was never meant for you in the first place. In the summer of 2009, a small group of Reddit users stumbled across something that didn't quite fit. A website, a set of usernames, a series of messages that, taken individually, meant almost nothing. But together they pointed towards something that nobody online was supposed to find. This is the story of Lake City Quiet Pills. And before we go any further, I want you to understand something. This mystery has never been solved. Not really. Yet if you were on Reddit in 2007, and almost nobody was, you might have come across a user who called himself Religion of Peace. He wasn't hard to find. He was everywhere. He posted constantly about politics, about what he called the foolishness of the modern world, about socialism, which he despised, about violence, which he seemed to understand a little too well. He described himself as an old man, genuinely old. He claimed to have been born in 1930. He'd mentioned the war. Not Vietnam, not Korea, the Second World War, with the kind of casual familiarity that only someone who'd actually lived through it would have. People called him Milo. Nobody seems to know exactly how that started. It was just what he became, Milo, the old man on the internet who talked like he'd seen things he shouldn't discuss. Now here's the thing about Milo. Man, he was easy to dismiss, crotchety, opinionated. The kind of guy who'd show up in a thread about something completely mundane and steer it into a rant about the decline of Western civilization. But every now and then, buried inside one of those rants, he'd say something that would stop you cold. He mentioned at various points that he had a military background, special operations, the kind of work that doesn't come with a lot of paperwork. He talked about interrogation, about surveillance, about what he called taking care of problems in ways that the legal system simply couldn't. Most people scrolled past. A crazy old man, an internet character, nothing more. And then one day in July of 2009, Milo stopped posting. The last post he ever made sat alone in a thread with no replies. Nobody noticed at first. And people go quiet on the internet all the time. Life happens. People move on. But 14 hours after that final post, a new user appeared. The username was 2-6, and 2-6 had a single message to share. Milo was dead. The post was short, rough around the edges, full of typos, broken grammar, the kind of writing that looks like someone typed it with shaking hands. 2-6 explained that he'd known Milo for years, that they'd served together, that Milo had, in his words, gotten him his first job. He thanked the community for caring about the old man, said he hadn't expected so many people to feel something about his passing. And then he was gone. One post. That was the only time the username 2-6 ever appeared on Reddit. Now, by itself. That's just a sad story. An old veteran dies. A friend breaks the news online. People pay their respects. But a few curious users started pulling at threads, and what they found underneath changed everything. See, 2-6 wasn't only on Reddit. There was another account on a site called Fark, a news aggregator popular in the mid-2000s, with the username Angel26. And Angel26 had been active there for years, long before Milo ever died, long before any of this began. What caught people's attention wasn't the username itself. It was the tagline, the little signature that auto-attached to every single one of Angel26's posts. It read, "Dispensing Lake City quiet pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. Nobody knew what that meant, not yet. But nobody could look away from it either. Here's where it gets strange. The phrase, Lake City Quiet Pills, that signature on the Fark account. It wasn't just a quirky line. It was a domain name. lakecityquietpills.com. Someone had registered it. Milo, it seemed, had advertised it occasionally on Reddit. Not aggressively, just dropping a link the way people did back then. He called it that old guy's image host, a place where he uploaded pictures. If you visited the site, that's exactly what it looked like. Photographs, nothing particularly notable. The kind of content you'd expect from a man in his late 70s who'd figured out the internet. Unremarkable, until someone checked the source code. Hidden inside the site's source code, invisible to anyone who just looked at the page, were strings of text. Not random text, messages. The researchers who found them weren't sure what to make of them at first. Some of it was cryptic. Some appeared to be references to locations. There were dates, initials, phrases that sounded at a certain angle like job postings. Not job postings for accounting work, not for retail positions. The phrasing was operational, clinical. It had the texture of internal communications between people who expected to be understood without explanation. And buried somewhere in those messages was a reference to a gathering, a meeting, a party, it was called, a specific date, specific attendees. When investigators later cross-referenced that date against publicly reported world events, their hands went cold. The date lined up with the assassination of a senior military official in the Middle East, a real event, a real person, a real operation. And somehow, tucked inside a hidden forum on an old man's image hosting website, there seemed to be a trace of it. Let's talk about the name, because the name is the key to all of this. Lake City. In Iowa, there exists a place called the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. It's one of the largest ammunition manufacturing facilities in the United States, responsible for producing a significant portion of the small arms ammunition supplied to the U.S. military. Its unofficial slogan, used internally for decades: dispensing Lake City quiet pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. Quiet pills. You understand what that means now. Bullets. The domain name lakecityquietpills.com, the image hosting site that this old veteran kept, was named after a military slogan for ammunition. And Angel 26, the man who announced Milo's death, had been carrying that phrase as a signature for years before Milo ever died. Which raises a question that, once you ask it, you cannot unask. Who were these people really? The deeper investigators dug, the less sense it made. In the best possible way. 2-6. Angel 2-6. Other usernames began to surface on other forums, scattered across corners of the early internet that most people had never visited. The writing style matched, the grammar matched, the spelling errors, very specific, very consistent ones, matched. Someone was maintaining a network of accounts across multiple platforms. That alone isn't unusual. People do that all the time. But this network had a texture that was hard to ignore. References to travel, to specific countries, but to the need for people with particular language skills. There were what appeared to be listings, and we're being careful here because none of this was ever verified, listings for work that required discretion. That required the right background. On the forum embedded inside the lakecityquietpills.com site, Angel 26 posted a notice following Milo's death. He told the small, clearly very private community gathered there not to worry. He had retrieved Milo's IronKey. If you're not familiar, an IronKey is a type of hardware-encrypted USB drive, the kind used by intelligence operatives and military personnel to store sensitive data in a way that destroys itself if tampered with incorrectly. It is not something a retired man uses for family photos. It is not something most people own. It is not something most people have even heard of. But Angel 26 mentioned it casually, like it was expected, like the people reading the message would know exactly why it mattered. The IronKey, he implied, meant that operations could continue. Operations. In January 2010, roughly 6 months after Milo's death, A senior military commander affiliated with a Palestinian militant organization was found dead in a luxury hotel room in Dubai. The operation, as it was later analyzed by intelligence communities and journalists alike, was widely considered one of the most precisely executed covert operations in recent memory. The team involved, identified by cameras throughout the hotel, had used multiple nationalities, multiple fake identities, and moved with the kind of seamless coordination that only comes from extraordinary training. This is where I want to be careful. This because the internet, in its excitement, made a direct leap. From hidden forums to assassin networks to a confirmed link with this specific event. That leap was never proven. The timing was suggestive. The language on the site was suggestive. The forum post referencing a gathering around a similar date was suggestive. But suggestion is not evidence. And the truth of this mystery is that almost nothing in it rises to the level of evidence. What it does rise to is something more unsettling. Plausibility. When the Reddit community began actively investigating LakeCityQuietPills.com, when the traffic started climbing, when posts started appearing on major subreddits, something happened. The site changed. Overnight, the readable content that had been hidden in the source code was replaced. Not removed, replaced with something else. It's a layer of encryption, numbers and symbols that didn't respond to standard decoding methods. And when researchers began working on that layer, the site changed again. Then it went offline entirely, and it never came back. Think about that timing. The moment the public started looking, the moment the flashlight turned on, whoever was on the other side of that website moved. Quickly, professionally, without leaving a trail. If this was a hoax, it was a hoax maintained by someone who watched Reddit in real time and responded with technical precision the moment they were noticed. If it was real, then we got closer than we were supposed to. Let's take inventory. An old man, a self-described veteran, runs a website with a name that's military slang for bullets. He's connected to a secondary username across multiple platforms. That username has a private forum embedded in the site. That forum contains what appear to be operational messages. The old man dies. His associate retrieves an encrypted military-grade USB drive. The site goes dark the moment public attention arrives. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, a date. A date that lines up with something real. Is it possible this was all elaborate fiction? A performance art piece? A very committed internet prank? Yes, it's possible. The internet has produced stranger hoaxes. Some people do extraordinary things for attention. And in the decade plus since this story first broke, no concrete link has ever been established between the forum and any confirmed real-world operation. The sensible position, the one that holds up under scrutiny, is that we don't know. We genuinely actually do not know. But here's the thing that stays with me. Milo, religion of peace, is described in every account as a consistent, long-term presence. Someone who posted for years, someone who built relationships with strangers online, the way people do. He had a personality, opinions, a writing voice. He also, at one point, said something on Reddit that researchers have returned to many times since. He wrote that he could think of any number of criminal organizations that would benefit from, and here he used the phrase again, a dose of Lake City quiet pills. He said it casually, like a man making an observation about the weather, like someone who wasn't speaking hypothetically. This story should end in 2009, maybe 2010, maybe when the site went dark and everyone moved on. But in 2022, more than a decade later, someone noticed something. The account for Religion of Peace, the dead man's Reddit profile, the account belonging to Milo. It had been awarded a Reddit Premium trophy, not by a bot, not automatically. Reddit Premium trophies require an active subscription. Someone, somewhere, was paying to keep that account active. Nobody knows who. Nobody knows why. The account made no new posts. left no new comments, gave no sign of life beyond that single quiet renewal. A subscription maintained for an account that belongs to a man who has been dead for 13 years. Either someone is keeping a memorial alive for a person they cared about, or something about that account still matters to someone who is very much still operating. And if that's true, if any fragment of this is true, then the people who ran Lake City Quiet Pills aren't gone. They're just quiet. They're just very, very quiet. This has been the story of Lake City Quiet Pills, an unsolved internet mystery that's been sitting at the edge of public knowledge since 2009. Never fully explained, never fully dismissed. If you found this video through your own research into the case, I'd genuinely love to know what brought you here. There's something poetic about the idea that people are still being pulled toward this story, that it still has gravity, 16 years later. If any part of what I've covered today is new to you, share it with someone. Not because the mystery needs more attention, but because the internet has a habit of burying its strangest chapters, and some stories are too strange to let disappear. I'll see you in the next one.